Chromosomes. Little strands of nucleic acids and proteins are the fundamental genetic instructions that tell us who we are at birth. Most people are born with 46 chromosomes, but each year in the United States, about 6,000 people are born with an extra chromosome, making them a person with Down syndrome. If you've ever encountered someone with Down syndrome, you know that they are some of the kindest, most joyful people you will ever meet. They truly have something extra. My name is Lisa Nichols, and for 30 years I have been both the CEO of Technology Partners and the mother to Allie. Allie has something extra in every sense of the word. I have been blessed to be by her side as she impacts everyone she meets. Through these two important roles as CEO and mother to Allie, I have witnessed countless life lessons that have fundamentally changed the way I look at the world. While you may not have an extra chromosome, every leader has something extra that defines who you are. Join me as I explore the something extra in leaders from all walks of life and discover how that difference in each of them has made a difference in their companies, their families, their communities, and in themselves. If you like this episode today, please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave us a 5-star rating. I'm excited to have Harsha Bellur on the show today. Harsha is the Chief Information Officer at James Avery Jewelry. Well, I have been looking so forward to this conversation. Welcome to the Something Extra podcast.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I'm delighted to be here, and it's such an inspirational story and journey you have enabled through this podcast. Just inspiring from your daughters, and you continue that tradition. So I'm super delighted to be here and happy to be chatting with your audience and
I
you.
know. I
Yeah.
just know that our listeners are just going to benefit so greatly from all of your wisdom. Listen, we can't do this podcast without giving a huge shout out to our mutual friend that both of us love dearly, Cindy K.
Yeah.
Olson. She is the one that connected us, and you and I both describe her in the same way. What did you say about her, Harsha?
Oh my gosh, I wish I could get 10% of the energy that she brings to any conversation. Go, Cindy.
Yes, go Cindy. So thank you,
Yeah.
Cindy. We both appreciate you so much. But there's so much I want to dig into, Harsha, but I can't dig into what you're doing today without going back to what you did when you were little. So, I mean, you've done so much in technology, but I'd love to talk about growing up. I know you grew up in India, and I would love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about your dad.
Oh boy, yeah, no, thank you for that. My dad's my hero, and he's always been the model, and that I aspire to be, and just have learned a lot from what he has done. He was a self-made man, and so he was an entrepreneur. He started his business. When I was 2 years old. So you could tell either I grew up with the business or, the business grew as I grew. I think both statements are true. He was the eldest of 10 siblings, and so. He decided to his father, my grandfather, was also a businessman, so he decided to step out of that business and start his own business. And being the eldest of 10 siblings, he also took on a lot of responsibilities to kind of really look out for his siblings as well. But just kind of coming back to the context of me and my story with him, uh, starting a business and starting an entrepreneurial journey is not all it's not a rosy road. So there was a lot of challenges, as one would expect when he started his business. And from my perspective, I'm the eldest son too. So the traditional kind of pathways that you inherit your parents' business, and so he was already an outlier to that tradition because he stepped out of his dad's business, and and so though the expectation was that I would one day head that business, I stepped out of that business. So that's kind of the later stage of the story. But just going back to those early days, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who just started, it's an iron and steel business that he started. It's a manufacturing facility. Uh, a lot of learnings that I observed, because I would not when I was 2 or 3, but maybe when I was 6 or 7, I started to actually go to the factory, and certainly during the summertime. And my job was really sit in the office and man the phone, right? So my job was pick up the phone, take notes on who called, why they called, and then report that back to my dad, because he had no office staff or whatever. So I was kind of really doing their job. But through that early exposure to business acumen and language, and customers calling, and then he asking me to ask the questions like, why are they calling? So it just kind of really started to develop that entrepreneurial mindset from a very young age for me. And so as the years passed, I got more and more involved, and I got exposed to how hard it is to find a new customer, dealing with employee issues, accidents in the factory,
Mm.
payment problems,
Right.
so just things that a typical startup and entrepreneur would experience. But having seen that and been through that without necessarily having to deal with that, so to speak, really shaped my thought process, really shaped how I approach my own work today. And so uh, the the trajectory and the journey was always about me eventually going into the factory. And so my dad was so I when I finished high school, he was adamant that I at least get a degree, and said, hey, this you always want to get a degree. And that's
Mhm.
partly cultural, because there's a lot of emphasis on education
Education.
in
Hmm.
India. And then it's also partly like, there's no need to rush. Like, this is here, just get some basic education, and just give you a good foundation. So I did my undergrad in telecommunications, and during that time, this was probably in the mid 80s. He actually, so by then, the factory had started to get some traction. He had a lot of customers, so he introduced computers in the factory. And suddenly, I was more excited to go to the factory, because I was fascinated by this thing. And in the course of my time, I don't know if people can relate to this, but before the computers came into play, it was all books and registers in how accounting and financials were done. So there was a vendor ledger and a payment ledger and this and that. So there was a point in time I recall when he said, "I want to do an outstanding payment report, or get a list of outstanding payments." And I'm like, "Okay, how do I do that?" He's like, "Here's the vendor ledger. Go look at all the vendors, and here's the cash register. Go look at all the receipts, and then see if there's any vendor that has not receipt, and that's the outstanding." I'm like, "What?" Like, that's not. So anyway, so when computers came in, all of this started to get automated. And while I had access to computers, I also started dabbling with it, doing my own thing. And it was so fascinating for me. So in
Hmm.
addition to kind of really getting early exposure to business and entrepreneurship, I also got exposure to computers, and you can start to see how that shapes up.
It completely changed the trajectory of your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Completely changed, because you,
Um,
and we'll talk about this, but you've been a serial CIO.
yeah.
And so I love it. And I'm thinking too, Harsha, when you're 6 and 7, you were getting an MBA when you
Yeah,
were 6 and 7 years old.
exactly. And that's the interesting thing. And then 40 years later, when I reflect on it, the specific challenges of running an operations in a business, and 40 years ago, and how you do that successfully to what it is today has not really changed a whole lot. And that's
Mhm.
so to me, having that experience such early on and being able to apply that throughout my career has just not only reinforced my learning, but also made me such a huge believer in some of those principles in how you truly operate and take care of your people and take care of your customers, listen to your customers, uh, you know, uh, ad- establish and adhere to some real core values. I mean,
Mhm.
those things just are true and timeless, and
That's a great way that is a great way to describe it, timeless.
yeah,
And that's the perfect segue because your dad I read something that you wrote, and you said that your dad told you, "Know your customer and build relationships."
yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, those principles, and those are basic principles, right, Harsha? But you said that you believe that's part of the secret to your success in your career.
Exactly, and what's interesting is that so after I did my graduation undergrad, I then pursued my master's because now I got fascinated with computers. I pursued a master's in computer science, and part of the curriculum is a capstone project in the last semester. So that was a time when I actually had to go work in actual technology company and do some real tech projects, though I already had a lot of experience. So kind of applying that principle, right, knowing
Mhm.
your customers, while I was and this was in Wipro Technologies, which is one of the largest
Yes.
tech behemoth services company, and I'm talking now mid '90s. So when I was doing my capstone project, I wasn't focusing necessarily on the technology itself because I was so um, kind of wired into thinking along this know your customer and build relationship, that I this was a they were working on a large ERP project that was a global implementation. So when I was part of the project, I'm just a young college grad trying to do a 6 month project, and really more focused on getting my checkbox on my academic goal, as opposed to
Mhm.
supporting the company. But yet when I was there, I spoke to the specific customers that were recipient of this project, and understood kind of their anxiety and their feelings about this project. I really developed the rapport with them, and then so in my report, the final report, I presented that as one of the risks, and nobody in the company had really thought about it. And I got my project done. I came back. I was going to go back to my dad's business, and 2 or 3 months later, the VP of the company called me and said, "We read your report, and we would love for you to come and join us and run this project." So in my first job, they offered me to run an implementation. I think I had about 6 direct reports. Um, and my dad was like, "Hey, that's what you want to do. That's exciting. Go do it." And so that was my first step
That's
into.
incredible, and you're probably 21 or
Yeah,
22 years old
I was like 21,
managing
22.
people. That's
And
incredible.
so that was it seems very abnormal to kind of speak to that, but then you would also wonder whether I was ready. But then it just seemed like it was a very natural fit for me. Yeah, I understood
Mhm,
how to work with people. I understood
mhm.
how to manage change. I understood how to deal with problems. While I had not had any kind of direct experience, I grew up knowing and learning about it.
I was gonna say you've been doing business since you were 6, so
Exactly. Yeah.
oh my goodness, that is so amazing. Well, I know that you spent a few years at Wipro, and then you came to the US, and you spent 12 years at Bolero, right?
Yeah.
And the last 6 of that as the CIO. What were some of your key accomplishments there, Harsha?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because the 2 years after I came to United States, I went through a lot of different companies. I was not just getting that satisfaction because every job I went to, it was so narrowly defined. I was a programmer, I was a DBA, I was a project manager. I'm like, no, I can offer a lot more than that. I've already done that. And so when I got to Bolero, that was kind of really where it's interesting, because I was there consulting with them on a Y2K assessment. And one day, I was trying to pick up something at the printer, and I saw this job description that says global CRM implementation, and there was, I think a project lead or some role, and I was like, oh, CRM, customer relationship. I'm like, okay, that speaks to me. And so I went to my boss and I said, hey, I don't know who is posting this job, but I would be very interested. And my boss says, yeah, that's exactly. We are looking to implement a global CRM. And Bolero was a global company. They had operations in 17 countries at that time. And so he said, if you want this job, it's yours to take. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh okay, I got it. So this was like late 90s. And so I got to lead a project of global CRM implementation, and again applying the same principle of build relationship, know your customers. So the CRM we were doing was for the sales teams, and the sales teams are almost always on the road, and we are talking about a bowling company, and bowling alleys are all over, little towns. And I'm like, okay, we're doing a solution for them, yet the only way they can get to this is when they're at their desk, and then they're mostly not at their desk.
Mhm.
So this thought process of really looking at things from a customer point of view got me to innovate and be creative. And I actually developed the first mobile application, that it was Palm Pilot. I don't know if you remember Palm
Yes,
Pilot.
I do.
So there was, because
Mhm.
there was no iPhones in late 90s. So uh, I built an application where they could sync up all the customer data on their Palm and then have that handy when they go visit their customers. So that innovation and that creativity was primarily because of the learnings and the principles that I applied. And obviously that got a lot of attention and press. And
Mhm.
I think we won an award as the best CRM implementation in the year 2000, global implementation. So obviously that got me, on the
A
forefront.
little notoriety there.
Yeah, exactly. And from then on, I had a very accelerated path, because people started to, kind of notice my potential and the value that I bring in. So I quickly moved into a director of PMO, heading all the projects, into, the director of technology itself, and then ultimately the CIO. So in
Mhm.
a 6-year window, I went from leading a global implementation to becoming the CIO of the company. And I was 32, Lisa, when I first got the CIO job.
That's
so,
amazing.
so,
That's
so it's been
amazing.
an amazing journey, and I think, kind of really the underlying principle that I've been operating remains the same.
Mhm, mhm. There is so much goodness packed into what you just told me. First of all, the first thing I think about, Harsha, is I'm so glad that you saw that posting and then you went and said, "Hey, I'm
Yeah,
interested in that," right? People can't read your mind.
yeah,
So we need
yeah,
to raise our hand and go, "Hey,
yeah,
that is something I think I might like to do." So there's the first learning. And then the emphasis on, I've got a good friend, another CIO friend. She actually just took another job in Georgia, but Bhavani Amirthalingam is her name. And I'll never forget talking to her. She said, Lisa, I've never worried about building my resume.
yeah,
She said, every place I've been, I just look and go, what can I do to bring value? And she said, if you will have that mindset, your resume will build itself.
exactly. Yeah,
And you putting yourself in the place of the sales people,
correct.
that
Yeah,
are on the road, they don't have access. They're going to have to, print off sheets
yeah,
about their customer interaction and things like this. I mean, that it's just that creativity comes, I think, when you have that mindset of putting yourself in the place of the customer.
correct. Yeah, and it's So while I have been thinking about or applying that principle from a customer perspective, as I've evolved as a leader myself, I think that that concept of empathy, right, empathizing, really now comes to even your teams, the people that you work with. And so it transcends, what I developed as something that I was applying with our customers as I've evolved in my leadership journey. I'm like, okay, that's a universal principle that I think
Mhm.
applies to more or less everything. uh, and
Agree.
that's part of what I see as a key ingredient in kind of really developing teams and retaining those teams and
Mhm.
for a long time as well.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, I was going to ask you to explain your leadership style, but I think you're probably a servant leader, empathic leader. Is there anything else that you'd want to say? I mean, obviously, an innovative, visionary. Anything else you'd want to say about that?
Yeah, I think I think those are big superlatives, but but one of my personal take on leadership is that obviously there's a natural style that we all probably are comfortable with or most comfortable with, and I would say, yeah, that servitude and servant leadership is the way that I think is natural to me. But over the course of time, I've learned that leadership is like you need a big toolbox, and you need different types of tools in different situations. And sometimes I have to be that assertive leader, and sometimes I have to be kind of the negotiator. Sometimes I have to just be the servant leader. So
Mhm.
while there's a natural trait that I think I'm most comfortable with, that it one size does not fit all, and
Right.
unfortunately in the environments that we work with, and people have different motivations, they have different and backgrounds and circumstances. So really helping to understanding those personal traits and then applying the right technique of leadership to help elevate them to where they need to be,
Mhm.
uh, is really what I've come to learn. And so when you read a lot of leadership books and you go through a lot of leadership training, there's a lot of new terms and principles that you hear and learn. But bottom line, it's all about taking care of your people, uh, making
Exactly.
sure you listen to them, making sure you understand their motivations and aspirations, um, and help everybody grow and be heard.
Yeah, that is so good. Okay, I'll add a couple more superlatives in there because I'm thinking you gotta be agile,
Oh yeah.
right? You have to be agile and to adaptable, to other, situations.
Right.
And then the other one that I would put in there, Harsha, is discernment, to
Yeah.
know when to use these different tools, correct?
Absolutely.
But
Yeah. Well, actually, it's interesting that you brought up discernment, because in the technology space that I operate in as a CIO, that probably is one of the most um, underappreciated trait, because certainly of late, there's always so much hype that comes out in the technology space, and sometimes. It's very difficult to understand what's real and what. So the ability to discern that and be able to articulate that to my peers in the business, or and do that with a degree of confidence without being a fool, making a fool of myself, that is as I said, is a very underappreciated trait, because
mhm,
it's so difficult to get caught up in the hype, and then you really don't know how to apply that hype that we're talking about, or you don't know how to make sense of it, but yet you're like, you don't want to be to you're dealing with the fear of missing out. So
right. I was gonna
the
say you don't
FOMO.
wanna be left in the dust either,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. So
Yes.
it's like you don't want to be feel the FOMO, as they say, the fear of missing out. So the ability to discern, I think, is a very underappreciated trait, and I thank you for bringing that up. It's
Mhm, mhm.
really
Well, that's good.
definitely a good point.
That's good. All right. I want to talk to you about one more thing, and then I want to get into what you're doing today because I'm excited about what you're doing today. Um, I know that mentorship is important to you. I read something that you wrote that you were mentored by a CHRO that really helped you mature as a leader. How do you think about mentorship? How do you get your people? Have you implemented any kind of formal mentoring at the place, and we're going to reveal it in a minute, where you're at right now, Harsha? How do you think about mentoring, and how important is it?
Oh, absolutely, very, very important, and I can tell that through my own experience. And while I haven't used the word mentor with my dad, certainly in hindsight, that's really what was happening. Though he wasn't necessarily not playing that role, nor was I kind of in seeking that mentorship, but it just happened organically for us. But along the way, you mentioned the CHRO, so that was during my first job at Bellur as the CIO. And it's a funny story because when I was offered the job, I actually didn't take it. I declined the job.
Oh, you didn't tell me that.
and to everybody's surprise, and obviously the CHRO at that time, Tony Tuansikian, who is actually still in Richmond, Virginia, and he came to me and said, "Oh, what happened? That was a big surprise." And so there was two components. One was I didn't feel the compensation was fair, so I told him, and the argument they made was, "Well, you're just getting started, so we just had to, tailor." I said, "Are you going to expect anything less from me because I just started?" And they said, "No." And I'm like, "Okay, then how? Why wouldn't we then compensate appropriately?" The second, probably the more important one, was I was I decided to pursue an MBA. So I had enrolled in the school in Richmond, Virginia, and I told the CEO who was hiring me then, "Hey, I just want you to know that I've enrolled here, and I just would love to get your support on that, because I will make sure that nothing is going to be that it's not going to affect or impact my job here." And he said, "No, that's your problem. That's got nothing to do with me." And that statement didn't kind of sit well with me. So I said, "Okay, if I don't feel that support," kind of going back to understanding people and building
Yes.
relationship, I was like, "Okay, that didn't connect with me." So I said, "Okay, I don't think I can see myself working with this individual." So after all this transpired, the CHRO came to me and he and I had a chat. And he convinced me that that was not what was the intent, and so on and so forth. So not only did everything work out okay at the end of the day, Bolero also sponsored part of my MBA, which was not part of the original deal.
Wow.
so so it all turned out for wonderful from then on. And
Mhm.
certainly success begets success, and then it just developed. So not
Mhm.
only that little incident, and what I learned later on was the CEO was so appreciative of my conviction, that I knew what I brought to the table. Though that was my first job and anybody would have just grabbed it, I was very clear in my mind, if I didn't connect with you, and you didn't understand my perspective, then I didn't see a path forward for us.
Mhm.
And he appreciated the conviction, which is why they decided to even support me in my pursuit of education after that.
Well, I know that they got a return on their investment because you actually took them to the next
Yeah,
level, I believe, and we love Bolero. Well,
I hope
Harsha, we do need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back on the Something Extra podcast with Harsha Bellur.
Hey there. In a challenging business climate like this, savvy leaders look to technology to find an edge. This can mean the difference between staying ahead of the curve or playing catch-up. It's time to collaborate with the highly skilled experts at Technology Partners. Our team of technologists draws upon decades of experience for your project, with each bringing a passion for solving problems and a track record of success. How can we help you overcome your biggest technology challenges? Visit technologypartners.net to book a free consultation with one of our leaders.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Something Extra podcast with Harsha Bellur. We have been having so much fun talking, but I'm bringing our listeners up to where you are today, Harsha, and you have been for the last 12 years, and you and I've talked about that. I mean, it speaks a lot to you character-wise. I think it speaks a lot to this company and the culture because it's kind of unusual for a CIO to be somewhere for 12 years, but I look at that as a real positive. But you're at one of my favorite brands, and that is James Avery. We had an office. I don't know if I told you this, Harsha, but we had an office in DFW back in the mid 2000s for about 6 years. And one of our colleagues there, Amy Roberts, introduced me to James Avery, and I have been a fan ever since. I absolutely love the brand, and you are the CIO. Can you give our listeners, maybe our listeners don't know the story of James Avery. Can you give our listeners just a little bit of history? And because it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you said you love James Avery. We love our customers too. It's a mutual relationship. But yes, so James Avery, 2024, we celebrated 70 years. And the company was founded by the namesake, Mr. Avery, James Avery, in his mother in law's garage in Kerrville, Texas. It's a little town about 45 minutes outside of San Antonio. And he was an industrial engineer by trade, and so he was trying to pursue his passion of creativity and artwork, and made some crosses initially, and he just handed off to his friends. And of course, as the story goes, they all loved it. It's like, how can I get more? And so the beginning of something big started there. One of the interesting components or aspects of the company is what we refer to as vertically integrated. So today we have about 140 retail stores. We obviously have e-commerce. We do wholesale business with the likes of Dillard's and one more in the Upper Midwest. Army and Air Force Exchange, a few of those facilities as well. And so, in all of this, when I talk about vertical integration, what that really means is that we have actually a staff of designers. Kind of this is kind of the trade that we continue from what Mr. Avery did. He was an artist by interest and passion. So we have designers who are professional artists, and they start with an inspiration of a sketch, right? Whatever products that we're looking to make, they start, and that inspiration can come from seasons, can come from personal experiences, faith, market trends, whatever. It could be inspiration from anywhere. And so when they create those sketches, that group of designers are on staff. That from there we do what is called prototyping. So we take this hand sketch and we have to create a prototype in metal that looks like a piece of jewelry that our customers will wear, and it's durable and it's affordable and so on and so forth. And once we get past that, we do our own manufacturing. And I say manufacturing, but it's really, we call those craftsman centers. And we have 1 to 4 craftsman centers. And so all of these operations are in Texas. And we do the entire cycle. So once it's in manufacturing, we then have our own distribution center, and then we have our own retail and e-commerce. So the entire experience of what we make and what we deliver and how we serve our customers is managed internally, end to end, and it's all managed here in Texas. So I think that's one of the unique aspects of our business, that we control the entire product life cycle and the customer experience end to end.
Yeah. So quality, it's going to be consistent, right? And customer experience. And I know that customer experience is so important to you guys, and we've talked about the story. So, there are, I guess, 3 anchors, is faith, family, and heritage. And that kind of remains part of the brand story today. I kind of laughed though, a little bit, Harsha, and I know you guys still do print this, but like in 1957, he printed his first catalog.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
it took me back to when I was a little girl and the Sears and Roebuck catalog that was about this big, And of course, now so much of it is digital, right? And you've got a
Correct.
very big e-commerce platform. I love it. Just for our listeners, this is remarkable to me. Um, since Harsh has been there, they've grown the business 4 times, 4x, increased revenues by quite a few percentages, achieved 50% reduction in manufacturing lead time, which
Yeah.
is awesome. Team attrition, Harsha, and this one is amazing to me, is less than 5%.
Less than 5%. Yeah. I mean, what I've been blessed with is, when I came on board here, uh, part of my mandate was exactly that, is to really enable technology as a competitive advantage to the business. So when I was hired by the then CEO, Chris Avery, who was the son of Mr. James Avery, and Chris, interestingly, is a medical doctor, is a certified MD by profession, and so he was a practicing physician and anesthesiologist. And then, when the business needed him to be here, he left that practice. And so when he and I spoke, he said, well, I don't know technology, I don't understand technology, but I do know tech. If we are not competitive in our application and use of technology, that's a detriment to business going forward. So I need a leader that can really cast a vision and
Mm-hmm.
really help James Avery become to use technology as a competitive advantage. And what was that? So that was music to my ears, and so obviously that's why I'm here. But what really that competitive advantage meant was, as a company, 50, 60-year-old company at that point in time, everything just grew organically. So we first started as a manufacturing facility, and everything was about making products. And as our retail footprint grew, we transitioned from being a craftsman manufacturer to becoming a retail company. And when you are a retail company, you have fixed costs with retail shops and stores, and you have a much more dynamic customer expectations. The shopping patterns change, consumer habits change. So our need to adapt to that became more important than our ability to just make products. And so that's really
Mm-hmm.
where the enablement of technology came into play, because we're vertically integrated. If we do make a product and our customers love it and it's going flying off the shelves, well, we have to be able to get those signals as quickly as possible so that we can make more of it. And vice versa, if something was not selling as well as we thought, we need to get those signals to stop making more of that, because
Mm-hmm.
it's all part of the management. So until we actually were able to kind of apply and leverage technology to what I refer to as connecting all these disparate parts of the business, because
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing dynamics are very different than retail, and retail dynamics, e-commerce is its own beast. And then in between all this is kind of supply chain. So being able to connect all these disparate functions and different technology stacks and provide a seamless and harmonious flow of information. And you mentioned agile early on, and in a fast and adaptive way, is really what the value add we bring. So from my
Mm-hmm.
team's perspective, I cannot hire somebody with just retail experience. I need somebody that can understand the true customer, and then really map those customer journeys and say, okay, how does something affect a customer journey and customer experience? Is it about shipping times? Is it about knowing when they get the product? Is it about knowing where their service status is, etc., etc.? So bringing all that together was really what the value add that we bring to my team. So just kind of coming back to your question about, you know, what was it then and what is it today? That was kind of really the journey and the transition that my
Mm-hmm.
team and
Yep.
I know. And in all of this, as we continue to um, mature our technology, I hired people. So when I came on board, we had about 9 people on the team. Today we have a little over 50, and everybody that we hired more or less have remained on the team, and as it is, the company has high tenure, and but much of my team, I live in Austin, and much of my team lives in Austin. So for us to have that retention in a tech heavy market like Austin, where you could work with all the big tech names,
Hmm.
I think is a remarkable
Testament. Yeah.
testament to kind of how we operate as a company.
Agreed. Agreed. I love it. Well, and that's the employee experience. But, this is remarkable to me. Your net promoter score from a
Yeah,
customer experience is 90%.
yeah, exactly.
Harsha, that ours is 88. So
Yeah.
you
Oh,
got
there
to
you go.
technology partners is 88. So you got to
Yeah.
beat by a couple percentage points. But
You got a new benchmark now, Lisa.
I know, exactly. But for anybody that follows NPS scores, the
Yeah,
industry average, we're both way above industry average, right?
exactly.
But you guys have done a remarkable job on the customer service because Newsweek listed you guys, added you as one of the most exceptional customer service. So just so awesome. Well, oh my goodness, I've got so many more questions, but I know we're kind of getting a little short on time. And you've already answered some of these about, the customer experience. Um, what do you see, Harsha? What are some of the biggest tech trends that you see right now that are shaping the retail industry and the manufacturing industry?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the the obvious response is AI.
I was going to say it's AI.
Yeah, yeah, it's really AI and all the different byproducts of AI. So certainly in manufacturing, we see robotics as a key opportunity. But here's the thing, though, Lisa. Certainly in James Avery and in our company, I mean, we are so proud of our heritage of craftsmanship and people actually making the products and not machines and robots making the products. So. It is important for in my role as we talked about discernment, so this is kind of another application of that discernment is not only tracking all the tech that's out there, but also making sure that the application does not dilute the brand value and the brand promise.
Mm,
And so it's easy for us to get excited about robotics and say, "Oh yeah, we're going to do all that," and but then we have to ask ourselves, like, does that align with our brand value? So I say that because that's an important consideration. That doesn't take away the opportunities to leverage technology, because as I've already noted, we have done a lot of that, but we have to always, the litmus test is that it should not dilute what
absolutely.
has developed as a brand promise and brand integrity for the last 70 years.
Mhm.
But so with that said, AI is definitely a big part of how I think a lot of things will change and evolve. And to be honest, I think it's still something that's developing. While we hear a lot of headlines and excitement about it, there's very few known published cases of true ROI that's been generated yet. And so for a company of our scale, we're gonna kind of wait and watch to see how that evolves. But beyond that, one of the most important aspects of having any AI be successful is really the data, because data is the fuel for AI.
It
And
is.
so, really understanding the data quality, the data integrity, and kind of really all of the data sets that we have available in the company, and how best can we organize and manage that to harness what might be out there from AI is also an important opportunity for because you can't run if you can't crawl, right? So
Right.
so you
Right.
have to really understand that there are some building blocks, and but the advantage with data is that you can start to generate value once you understand what you have and how you derive insights. even without AI can just kind of really, boost what we can do in terms of speed and efficiencies. Um, so those two things come into my mind. But then, of course, there's always, certainly in retail, there's a lot of virtual experiences like virtual try-ons and and I think there's that has had mixed response in terms of how that has panned out. But I do think as immersive experiences continue to evolve with again, AI uh, the cost efficiencies of compute, because these immersive experiences require, powerful compute resources, and then as the
Mhm.
costs come down, I think those can
That's
become
going to
more and
go
more.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I think consumers probably um, uh, might appreciate that, because they don't have to worry about how something might look. And because online shopping, that was always the challenge with online shopping, is you can't quite tell, uh, because you don't have the
If it
test.
looks good
Yeah.
on you,
Or
it
even
may look good
yeah,
online,
yeah,
right?
because particularly in the industry that we are, it's very tactile, right? It's not just about looks; it's about how it feels and how it, kind
Mhm.
of, there's a tactile emotion that we have to feel, and that's always going to be a challenge. But on the other hand, though, which is kind of a counter intuitive, is that um, there has also been a resurgence in customers' desire and interest to actually be in the stores. And what is interesting about that is that there is a clear distinction between stores that do well in terms of how what that experience is, and hence, customers are more inclined to go there. And then there are stores that haven't quite figured out how to do that, and those experiences can still be frustrating. And so for us at James Avery, we clearly can tell that our customers love to go to our stores. And
Mhm.
we, even though we have online sites, 50, close to 50% of our online business is actually pick up in store. So the customers really want to go to the store to pick up the product.
Right.
So it's an interesting dynamic there. And so one of our focus in as it relates to retail is to also to look at the store experience and how we can enhance that. And when it comes to store experience, what another interesting angle is, because we have people, store associates who assist our customers. We also have to focus on our associates' experience, because if the tools they have and the things that they need to do are seamless, they are able to then translate that into better experience. How many times have you heard when you call a call center or wherever saying, "Oh my gosh, my computer is so slow today"? Okay, obviously, if that's what they're dealing with, that directly translates to how the customer's experience was going to be in that
Oh,
space.
no doubt. No
Yeah.
doubt. It's fascinating, though. It is really fascinating. Let me ask you this question. I read an article that you wrote, because you write a lot for the National CIO Review,
Yes.
and it was titled Unlocking Business Value with Technology. And you contrast that with rather the traditional technology in business. Can you unpack that just a little bit? And I have a few more questions for you, and then we'll talk about something extra.
Yes, and this is really what I see as kind of really what the potential and the opportunity for tech leaders, CIOs, is that historically, it was always thought, technology was always thought as kind of an efficiency enabler. Like we would, implement an ERP because it makes more sense to have everything in one platform, and we would implement a HCM or CRM, what have you. Never was technology thought to be a tool or an enabler for top line revenue or customer experience. Like it was never an outward looking business growth strategy. It was almost inward looking. How can we make things better? So to me, that was really the point that I was trying to make, is that we should stop talking about technology in business, like, hey, well, what are we doing inside, but really talk about technology as a business, where if I want to improve 2% top line growth, like how can technology help? That's kind of really the narrative that I think I was suggesting is
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity for leaders. And what's important for us to do that was not necessarily, it's not a statement and suddenly things change, but it also required us to have an intimate understanding of the business, right? We needed to understand where the potential was to improve our margins, or where the potential was to improve our top line growth, or
Mm-hmm.
and work with those partners, right? If I'm like you mentioned manufacturing, so one of the things that we had a challenge was that the signals of inventory sell through, as the term we say, is how much was actually selling. We were not getting that in a timely manner with the manufacturing. So if something went off the shelf in retail, it would take 8 to 10 weeks before manufacturing can
Catch up.
refill the stock,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's called cycle time. From the time I get the signal, how much time do I need to refill the coffins, if you will? That was about 8 to 10 weeks. So by if I understood that, and okay, if you think about something like this, in the month of December, we lost significant revenue because we didn't have inventory, and we didn't have inventory because we couldn't send the signals fast enough. So if I'm
Mm.
able to have a dialogue with our manufacturing teams along those lines and say, by the way, what if we find a way to get you information more real time? What do you think, or how do you think that would help you manage your cycle time? And so, and they would say, oh yeah, if the problem that we have today is that it takes 2 3 weeks before we understand something. Okay, so if I can get you real time, so are you telling me that you can cut 2 3 weeks of your cycle time? They're like, yeah. So then we figure out how to help
Mm-hmm.
solve that. And so now we are back down to 3 to 4 weeks
Right.
before
And
we.
your throughput's gonna be better, right? Your
Yeah,
throughput's gonna be better, your
yeah,
top line's gonna be better because you're gonna be selling faster.
exactly. So
Um,
to me, this is kind of really the principle of the technology, the business of technology. Is like, okay, we have to think of the how we use technology in the true context of running the business, not in terms of how we kind of make something that's going on today more efficient. That's still
mhm.
important. That doesn't go away. But my
Right.
my, my point there was kind of around that.
Right. Oh my goodness, Harsha, there's so many things we can talk about. I know you were a CIO award winner in Austin. You were voted as CIO of the year there. I think you're in part of Inspire, right? Because you were an Orby finalist. We were the founding underwriter for Inspire in the St. Louis chapter.
Oh,
So
you okay?
we've got that connection. Yeah, but let me ask you just one more thing, and then we need to talk about something extra. We don't need to, but we get to. We're privileged to talk about it because I cannot wait to hear what your something extra is. But yeah, I know you're a huge reader. You're an avid reader. So am I. As you can see from behind me with all of the books. What I know that you've said that there are some books that you really like. You love Simon Sinek. I do too. Start
Yeah.
with Why, Courage. What other books have really inspired you? Are you reading something now currently that you could share with our
Yeah.
listeners?
The first book I picked up, in 25 is a book called The Coming Wave. It's really about AI, and it's from an author called Mustafa. He was one of the founders of DeepMind, which was, I think, got acquired by Google. Um, and I'm reading that just because obviously AI is now the headline everywhere, and I wanted to
Mhm.
get some of the perspectives from these thought leaders, because this is a space where, as I said, there's a lot of noise, and it's my responsibility to kind of really clear the noise and understand the matter. So I picked up this book, which honestly, Lisa, if I was going to read this 10 years ago, I would have probably qualified it as a fiction. But but
Oh, it's a brave new world.
for good or bad,
Mhm.
it's reality that we're dealing with right now. So that's the book I'm currently reading. But one of my interests over the course of time has been in behavioral psychology, and it's just I don't know, somehow it energizes me, makes me very curious to understand why people are the way they are, or why people behave the way they do, and it's deeply reflecting as much as it's kind of learning,
Mhm.
and it also aligns. I love travel, love to travel, and my criteria on how I choose travel are a combination of nature, culture, and history. So I pick spaces. So when I from that experience, I look at history and see, oh my gosh, how much of history kind of really is manifesting itself in current times. Culture, as much as we think there are different cultures, when you kind of remove the facade and look underneath, it's humanity everywhere.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's so that travel that I've been doing from a very young age has really, as I've in where I am today in my professional career and personal life, I'm more reflective now on, and so behavioral psychology has really helped me, kind of help reinforce that thought process and perspective. So I read. I'm not reading a lot of books. I subscribe to Blinkist. I don't know if you know Blinkist.
We love Blinkist.
Yeah.
Yes, my husband
So
Greg is a Blinkist, evangelist. He
yeah.
loves
So
Blinkist.
between podcasts on Spotify and little snippets in Blinkist is how I'm consuming a lot of material today.
Mhm, mhm. Oh, good. I love that. You and I could probably do a whole podcast just on books that we've read and that we love, and, yeah. Well, okay, so that brings us to this question. Harsha, what is your something extra? And I would love for you to not just tell me what it is, but maybe why, if there's a story that you can relate to why you think, that something extra is what every leader needs. What is your something extra that you believe every leader needs?
Hmm, that's such a great question, Lisa. I know this was gonna come, but I I was giving this a lot of thought and I was thinking about it. But what really came back to me over and over again, and again, this could be just kind of my experience, and I find that a lot of leaders are very good in vision casting. They know how to kind of help present the future and paint a picture. Uh, but and then a lot of leaders that are really good at okay, getting the job done. I think that that combination of the two, right, is not common. In my experience,
Mm,
I haven't seen a lot of leaders that can not only paint a vision and a future state, but also kind of map out how to execute and get to that. So it kind of goes back to the strategy and execution. So to me, if somebody's got that you know sense for, okay, I know where we need to be, but I also have a general direction on how we get there, and let then kind of allow the teams to figure out the mechanics of it. uh, in my experience, perhaps this comes through that kind of that entrepreneurial lens, because when you're an entrepreneur, you obviously have to cast that vision and also figure out how to get there. So yeah, however you want to characterize it, whether it's the blend of strategy and execution, or maybe it's kind of a dose of entrepreneurship. I find that to be like a perfect asset if somebody can bring that to the table.
Yes. I would say that would be a major competitive advantage, right? If you have that, because really, as you were talking, Harsha, I was thinking you had the vision, but you don't really understand how to get there. I mean, you can surround yourself with people,
Yeah,
right? COOs and things like that. But I'm thinking it's just a dream.
yeah,
It's a
exactly.
dream and it will go nowhere,
Yeah,
right? So I think you're spot on there. I love that. And I've not had in our 330, almost 330 episodes, I've not ever had anyone say that like that. So that's
okay.
good. It resonates with me. It truly does. So, gosh, Harsha, this has been so much fun. I appreciate you making the time so much because I know that you're really busy, but I appreciate it. And I know that our listeners are going to appreciate learning from you.
Yeah, no, Lisa, it was such a pleasure just sharing my experience and talking with you. Thank you for having me on the show. And hopefully, your audience will find, at least one thing that might inspire them or get them to think.
Absolutely. Well, I am looking forward to our next interaction, Harsha. So thank you so much again for being on the show. Have a great rest of the day.
All right, awesome, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to today's show. Something Extra with Lisa Nichols is a Technology Partners production. Copyright Technology Partners, Inc. 2019. For show notes or to reach Lisa, visit tpi.co/podcast. Don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you listen.